Gaming Guild presents the Nat Pod Podcast.
Welcome everybody to our second episode of Fireside Chat. As always, I'm joined by the lovely Bertie. Say hello, Bertie.
Hello, Bertie.
The wonderful Ash. Say hello, Ash.
Hello, Ash.
And the fabulous Andy. Say hello, Andy.
Hello. Fabulous.
Fabulous. That's completely thrown me. Go on. So today, going to have a look at the new Monster Manual, which at the time of recording came out, like most people got their hands on about a week ago. We've all had a quick look through, some of us more than others, and going to digest some of the new monsters, new information, new layout. So first off, Ash, what's your impressions?
I like it.
Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yes.
No.
No, that's it. I just liked it. In line with the other, like the player handbook, the artwork is really nice.
Yes.
I like that. I like the way the new stat blocks are laid out. I think they're actually easier to use once you get your head around them a little bit and you know where you're looking. So that's nice too. I think we spoke a little bit about it last time, didn't we? We spoke about like monsters having gear and stuff like that, which was good. And generally, the monsters are more deadly.
Which is very exciting from a DM's perspective.
And they need to be, as a player characters getting all their new shiny stuff. Us DMs need some fun too.
What about you, Andy?
Well, firstly, point of correction, I don't think it's so much a case of us digesting the new monster manual. I think it's going to be more the case of the monsters digesting our characters.
Very true.
Because they are, as Ash has already pointed out, more deadly. I haven't actually got my book yet, although last time I said that I actually ordered it whilst we were actually playing. So if you hear a little crackle, it'll be my phone connecting to Amazon. But yeah, from what I have seen, I've never really taken much notice of the artwork. That's all just gump for me. It gets in the way. But that's personal. I mean, the artwork does look lovely, but it's not something that really appeals to me. I do like the layout. I think some of the sort of indices make things easier. So you mentioned about how some of the monsters are grouped by terrain and the likes, and I think that can make your life as a DM much easier if you are playing a game and you want the creatures to really sort of tie in with the area, the map that you're using. That makes life a lot easier. So all in all, yeah, a big thumbs up from me.
Wonderful. Bertie, have you got any thoughts?
I do, and my thoughts are not in the technical as Andy and Ash. The pages feel really nice and it smells good.
That new book smell.
Yeah, it's got that new book smell. The quality of the paper that's been used is really nice. It's nice to literally turn the pages. You don't even have to look at what's on them. Just turn the pages and it feels really good. But yeah, art's lovely, and it seems like there's a lot more in there than before. It felt like before the pictures were really big and then the text was a lot smaller, whereas this time it seems the other way around. The pictures are still there, but you're getting a lot more content in comparison to what you had previously, which is nice.
Yeah, I think I'd kind of agree with that. There's a lot more. The text that's in there is also, I think, much more specific in terms of encouraging you how to use it. Most of the monsters have got a little sort of, these are scenarios, or these are its wants or its goals as well, which I think is really nice, and I think encourages creativity when you're sort of flicking through the book. Is there anything that you think might be missing from what you've seen? I'm going to go to Ash, I think, again first for that. Is there anything that you would have liked to have seen in there that's not in there that you've noticed?
The first thing that jumped out at me was the lack of an orc.
Which has been commented on by quite a lot of people, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it stood out to me even more seeing as the first combat encounter you guys had in our campaign for this podcast were orcs. So there was no way of translating that directly into a nice new stat block to be used that way. It just seemed a bit of an odd one to me because it's such a classic fantasy enemy creature that you'd come across. Obviously wizards have got their own justification and reasons for doing that, but I would have liked to have seen how they would develop the orc, much like they developed the goblin in here, and the different types of goblins that you can have.
Could that be a result of the fact that they've all now given up the art of warfare to become con men with rigged fair games attractions?
Maybe. Perhaps it is.
What about you, Bertie? Was there anything that jumped out as you went just from your look through? If there was anything missing?
Again, maybe on a slightly different tangent. This is so sad. I wish they would include free stickers of the monsters. Like, just, you know how you get some books and in the back there's like a couple of sheets of stickers that is themed around the book that you've got. And I just think it would be so cool if they did that for the monster manual. You just have a couple of pages of stickers of different monsters or different things that you could have, just as like a little, I'm just going to put this on my DM screen, or I'm going to give this as a gift to one of my players, or decorate my car with it.
I was going to ask what you were going to do with the stickers, but you just give us some lovely examples. You could also use them as monster tokens.
I was going to say,
Yeah, stick them on a base.
Yeah.
So if we just go away and find a whole book of stickers, you would be quite happy for us to stick them all over your car?
That's what I heard.
I realised the mistake I made.
Make sure you come to November's game in a different car,
Yeah.
not your own one.
I'm going to make Dad drive.
We did do something similar to Niall at one of our 12-hour games, where one of our members, Becca, made I Heart Zaphon stickers,
Nice.
and we just kept sticking them on Niall's DM screen, because his screen's just covered in stickers, like various stickers of all kinds of different things. Snuck a couple of them on there.
They cropped up in a few places, actually, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
For quite a while after the event as well, if I remember rightly. What about you, Andy?
Well, nothing jumps out at me. I think ultimately what we've got to remember is that this is a tool, and different people will use it in different ways. I mean, in the games that I run, I've got a shitload of different models from various different gaming systems, and I will look at a model and think, yeah, that would look really cool on the table. And what I often do then is, if it isn't a specific monster that sits within the rule set, I will find something that is the right sort of challenge, and then create a homebrew using that model, but with the stat line of a recognisable creature. So I guess the way I use it personally, it's not necessarily got anything missing. The fact that it has got some improvements over the last one, I think will make it easier for me to sort of run, make these changes and make these sort of homebrew creatures for my games going forward. So no, as far as I'm concerned, it's all good.
Good. And you mentioned, Ash, about the monsters being deadlier, which from a DM's perspective is lovely. After the player's handbook come out, I think a lot of DMs are looking at it going, players have got a lot more hit now than they ever had. And with the old monster manual, you then had to up the difficulty or try and figure out where the new balance point was.
TPK!
I mean, I've been trying for 2 episodes, and you lot survived somehow, so...
You're doing alright so far. But what other, having sort of monsters that are more deadly, potentially, how do you think that fits in with the way you play in games, the way you use the monsters, potentially?
Whenever I balance an encounter, my combats will always be deadly as a minimum, because that creates a challenge and a real risk of death. If there's no risk of death to you as a player, there's no stake in the combat whatsoever. It's just a walkthrough. It's just easy, and we don't want it to be easy. We want it to be a challenge. You want to be pushed as players and learn about how to interact with each other, and when you do certain things, and perhaps how your abilities work.
He's looking at Andy.
We'll come on to that.
And Andy doesn't care.
I bet you want more deadly creatures, and this monster manual really shows that. You've had the monsters have become that much more deadly. An example, which I've opened on this page, is the assassin, and if you're reading along at home, that is on page 22 of the monster manual. If you look at his short sword, it's a 5-foot reach weapon with +7 to hit, 1d6 +4 piercing, and 5d6 poison damage. This same stat block in the previous monster manual then called for a saving throw, otherwise the target would be poisoned. There's no saving throw now. You're poisoned until the end of your next turn. That's it.
I think that's an interesting design choice, though, isn't it? Because the lack of the saving throw, one, that keeps it simple for players and for the DM, also could be a bit unfair. So there's just for the one turn, whereas in previous editions you were poisoned until
Yes,
you saved,
yeah.
weren't you? So it would linger on for a
Yeah.
combat. But now it's just a temporary boon.
Yeah.
No, not boon. Other one. Hindrance. I'll go hindrance.
Hindrance. we'll go for
Hindrance.
that. Yeah, I think you're right. It makes it simpler, and it makes the monster more deadly.
Yeah.
And you see that throughout the book as well. The simplification, whilst making things more deadly, the way lair actions have changed into increasing the number of legendary actions. It's a huge change, but it actually makes the monster itself more deadly rather than it relying on affecting its environment.
I don't really think it changes the feel of the monster.
No.
Because it's in the way you describe what's
Absolutely,
going on,
yeah.
isn't it? It's-
Yeah.
But is it following the universal rule?
Of
The female of the species is more deadlier than the male.
Preach.
There is no mention of sex in the book at all.
I could sing the song.
We don't have the money for that.
Okay, that's why I only. Oh.
So Andy, something you spoke about was finding a monster and flavouring it and adjusting it
Yeah.
to kind of fit your latest awesome miniature purchase. How do you go about actually doing that?
Well, firstly, I buy the miniatures.
That's the key.
We go real
Yeah,
step by
absolutely.
step here.
Yeah. Then you buy some more miniatures. Is that?
Then I
that's
buy
the-
some more,
Mm.
which can in itself create the problem of thinking, oh, I want to use this one. Oh, bugger, they all need painting now. Which goes against any gaming enthusiast's ethos, because everything has to be grey, as we know. No, I mean, I do, as you know, D&D is not the only game I play. I play a whole host of different tabletop games and board games, all with miniatures. And there are some great sculpts out there from many, many, many different manufacturers. And if it just makes the board look interesting and look fun, we all orcs, raising the point that Ash made earlier, orcs are a mainstay of any fantasy game. But that means that how many times have you fought an orc in a game?
Yeah.
So I just like to, and it's only me, and I'm not saying it's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. It just fits with my preference. I like to have something different on the table, something new, something that people won't necessarily have seen or played against before. And so I very much will use the rule book, so the rules still match. We're still using the same sort of stat lines and challenge ratings and everything that would make it fit within the story arc, but it's just got a slightly different name, and it's got a slightly different appearance to perhaps the sort of creatures you might come across in most other games. So I think, for me personally, I think it's a wonderful tool, but I use it specific to my needs.
Mm. So how do you actually go about doing it, though? Do you just take a stat block you found, change the damage type? Do you mix and match abilities?
There are going to be occasions where I might change. I mean, the stat block I try and leave as is, because I will often use the D&D Beyond sort of combat builder to get a feel for whether I've got the right difficulty setting. So I try and leave the attack profiles and everything. I mean, it might be that they're using a sword rather than a claw, and therefore
you just describe it differently when you run it.
Just describe it differently, and it might be piercing damage rather than slashing damage, but it's still D8 plus 3 or whatever the stat line happens to say. Again, occasionally I might adjust the hit points, depending on, and sometimes, I'm sure we all do this as DMs, sometimes that is a fluid action. So if a combat isn't quite going as well as you had hoped for the players, and you're only halfway through and you don't want to TPK with an hour and a half of your game left, I might then, how do you want to kill it, even though it's got 50 health points left still. So I try and keep it as close to the original stat as possible, but make some minor tweaks that are more cosmetic than anything else to fit the model appearance. And then, occasionally I tweak things if the game's going wrong.
And what about you, Ash?
I think I'm kind of halfway, well, not halfway, a kind of a mix of what Andy's said, but also I do quite enjoy completely building stat blocks up from nothing. So using the online generators, which you can then populate to make the stat block look official, even though you've homebrewed it. I quite enjoy doing that. I do that quite a lot. A lot of our players are experienced D&D players as well. So what Andy said is a great way of reflavouring what's in the book, so they don't realise they're necessarily fighting whatever that creature is. But then I'll create that homebrew stat block to add that variety back in, and that sense of we don't know what the hell we're fighting or what it does or how to beat it or anything. Because like Andy said, once you've fought an orc and you know what to do and what to expect. Whereas if it's an elemental earthworm that you've never come across before, because I've made the stat block ahead of the game, you don't necessarily know exactly what it's going to do.
Very good point. Bertie, have you got any thoughts? Obviously, you don't run as many games as kind of Ash and Andy and stuff, but from a player's take on fighting weird and wonderful.
So here's a secret for you. And the times when I do run games, I will flip open a monster manual to a page, and then whatever is on that page
is what
I will use.
Nice.
So that is sometimes you might find a creature in an environment that, it's a bit strange that normally you find this underwater, but it seems to be in a cave. That's because I flipped open to that page in the monster manual.
And if somebody asks about it, is there an underground lake?
Yeah. You just work it into the narrative. But because I think the tricky part of it is, for me, is that a lot of the time you fight the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the majority of the time is you're fighting orcs, or you're fighting wolves, or you're fighting goblins, and there are so many more creatures that you could be fighting. So sometimes, that's what I like, you might mention this in a minute, but sometimes I like the fact that in this book there is the tables of what creatures you might find in a certain area. So okay, there's 20 of them, brilliant, roll a d20, 17. Number 17, that's what I'm using. So it's more accurate than me just flipping to any page. But you're still not just going, well, I know how wolves work, so I might as well just use wolves. And especially with it being a fantasy setting, anything can show up. There is no reason why you can't have the weirdest freaking creature in the universe just pops out of the ground while you're just trying to get from one village to another. Because it's a fantasy.
It's magic.
Yes.
See, I kind of agree with what all of you said around that. It's I think the stat blocks and the way they've laid them out in terms of the NPCs as well. I know we've obviously mentioned about them not having orcs, and the official advice is, well, you just use the tough stat block, I think is what most people are saying. But that means you can have anything. You can have an orc assassin and use the assassin stat block, can't you? But just a little bit of flavour, maybe something from the species trait to kind of chuck in there as well from the player's handbook. And if you want a troll wizard, you've got a troll wizard done, like, nice and easy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of material out there. I know we're looking at the official sort of monster manual, but there are so many expansions and additional books, and even sort of 5e rated or related content that isn't officially D&D. So I've played Dark Souls games, so there's some wonderful creatures on there that I've used. Tanares is another game. They've got a specific 5e rule set, and there are some incredible creatures. So they've even got different sort of species. So you've got what they call gloomfolk. So imagine a centaur, but instead of a horse torso, they are a giant scorpion torso. Which is, again, it just adds a bit of flavour. As Bertie said, it is a fantasy world, and it's pretty much whatever we can imagine can exist there.
There's also plenty of third-party, official D&D, not official, unofficial third-party for D&D stuff that I use, like Kobold Press, Tome of Beasts and the Creature Codex. Amazing books, and great for chucking something in that's totally different. If you're having a real lack of inspiration. So Bertie, I've done something very similar to you, where I've got to run a session. I think I've got no real inspiration, just open up a monster manual or one of those books, pick a high CR creature and build an encounter around that creature. It's kind of similar to what you're saying about just opening up randomly, but that can end up in some quite weird and wonderful places, quite fun encounters. It happened in one shot that I ran a very long time ago now, where they had to fight a house.
Hmm.
I think it was Malicious Divinity. I may have done it again since then, I can't remember. But it was basically fighting an animated gingerbread house, which had a witch trapped inside. But on the face of it, it looks like the witch is the monster to kill, but it's not. It's the house keeping the witch hostage.
Yeah.
So it kind of flips it on its head.
Yeah.
Which is very cool. And again, like I think you said before about like multiple layers to your fights and stuff like that, isn't it? So, cool
One thing I really enjoy doing when I do is making the combats have a little bit more impact narratively for the players. So as an example, I ran a campaign before, and one of the players, something had happened. He had like these two little squires that would do jobs for him, and something had happened to those squires, and they came up against this blob that could form into people because it could like suck your thoughts in. So I had a bit where they're fighting, and all of a sudden it formed into one of these squires that was dead, and it's like all of a sudden it's that, for him as a character, it's like, well, as far as you know, it's your squire. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And like, bringing that in, instead of just going, it's a wolf, you're going to stab it, or it's this Bulef, is that the one? Burlef? I don't know what I'm talking about, but it begins with a B. There's another creature. Like, fighting one of those is going, okay, what can you do narratively that might draw on something from your character's backstory, or what they've been going through so far, that actually doesn't make it just another combat. It's something that they maybe have to make a decision about what they're going to do and how it impacts them, which is fun.
Now, I've done something on a really big scale, and I must admit this was not my idea. It was a story that I found and used, and in essence the entire story was on board this ship. So, and Bertie, you played on this, didn't you?
Yeah.
So the crew were, your adventurers were traipsing through this ship, going up and down different decks or whatever, and fighting all the creatures on board. But it turns out the entire ship was a mimic, which was, I don't think anyone saw coming until quite late in the game. But yeah, that was an interesting game to run.
How did they? I want to know how they got off the ship now without being eaten or stuck to it.
Well, they do you know, I can't remember.
How did you get off?
Did you not have to negotiate an option?
See, if you've listened to the previous episode, you'll know that I don't really remember.
But you played in this game, and
Yes.
you said
I ran the
remember
game,
it.
I don't remember.
I
You said,
I
if you-
played
my
it.
character. I remember.
No, if you tell me that your character did this, then I'll be like, yes, okay. But no, I think we didn't fight the ship. There was some sort of negotiation.
I think there was.
Yeah.
I think the ship had an agenda. Funny
Yeah.
enough, we're talking about the monsters and their personal agenda. I think the ship had an agenda. It wanted to just live and exist and carry on. And I think we allowed it, and it let us go. And in doing so, I think we found the amulet that led to Mara.
The creaking of everyone's chairs.
Cool.
That was my back.
I think that probably about wraps up. Talked about Monster Man. There's lots more in there. If you haven't had a chance to have a look. It's an awesome looking book. Really cool stuff in there. So talking about your adventures and player characters and things like that. We haven't got any specific rules that anyone's asked us to look at, but I wanted to talk a bit about knowing your character and knowing how your characters work. So in our last week's session, Andy made a comment about his character sheet and not necessarily knowing all of the traits. So what do you guys do to prep and understand how your character's going to work before you go into a session? Bertie?
I create my character very, very close to the date that I'm playing, because then it's as fresh in my mind as possible, and I have more chance of remembering the abilities that I have and what my character can do. I don't tend to write too much or put any too much down with regards to any like backstory or like goals or anything like that, because I find it more fun to figure that out as you go along. So with most of my characters, they don't know what they want necessarily, but as part of playing it, I go, oh, actually, they quite like the idea of being renowned in this group of people. They've kind of seen what those group of people are doing. I want to get involved in that and stuff. So with this as well, because it is quite a while between sessions, it does take a little bit for me to get back into it as well. That is also why I choose very simple builds, because there's not too much you have to try and figure out between them. So I'm a fighter, I hit things, I have a few manoeuvres which, if it doesn't get cut out, I had to ask some questions about whether I could use them and stuff. So it's trying to keep it as simple as possible for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I go into it, and then figure out the rest along the way.
What about you, Ash?
There's two parts to this. There's the background part and the kind of rulesy mechanical part. The mechanics part. The background part I find easy because you're writing to a DM's session or setting. But in terms of learning the rules for a character, a good example is the character I use in Stuart's campaign on Tuesday nights. To learn how that character works, I make the character and I'll sit down with dice and I'll pick a stat block, which might be something nice and simple like an orc or a goblin, and I'll just roll attacks against that thing. So the character I've got is a soul knife rogue, so I want to know what do I need to do if I make a ranged attack, and I'll make a ranged attack against him, physically get the dice and roll the dice, or a melee attack, and then go through sort of how that works. I look slightly insane doing it when I'm sat in the living room just rolling dice, and my wife looks at me like, what are you doing? But I find that helps ingrain those roles and what I need to do in my head, and then at the top of my character sheet I'll write like a flow chart of if I'm attacking I need to remember to do this first, so I can then get advantage on the attack, trigger the sneak attack and those sort of little bits and pieces. So straight away I'm already thinking about how those mechanics work, so when I hit the game and hit the tabletop I know what I'm doing straight away and I can be as effective as possible from as early as possible.
You were one of them people who used to revise for tests, weren't you? You have a test in school and you'd be like, I'm going to revise for this.
A little bit, yeah.
Is that an option?
Yeah, I just always rocked up, and I think that's how I roll my D&D. I'm like, no, I'll figure it out.
Figure it out on the day. Be fine. What can go wrong?
Whereas Ash is sitting there going, I'm fighting an orc. I'm fighting an orc.
What about you, Andy? Prepping your character wise.
I probably don't. If I'm honest. I build a character based on just flavour, what I like, both race and class. I try and stay away from the more complex. As I say, I don't think I've ever used a magic user, and part of that is purely, if we talk managerial speak, my brain operates very much at a strategic level rather than a detailed level. So I find it difficult to retain lots and lots of detailed rules. So if I have something that's too complex, I will never remember it all. Never. So barbarian is easy for me. Rage, hit, done. Thank you very much. I also know full well that because at some point in my life I have really offended the dice gods, so I know that my dice rolling will be appalling, and I'm not going to do much damage anyway. So I will choose a character and try and develop it more for the sort of I guess the thematics, so the way that its relationship develops with the party. How its character comes across. You might have known that I like to throw the odd joke in occasionally where I can, so I will look for opportunities to just throw in a joke and try and make people laugh, because that's something that I get a big kick out of. So yeah, I guess, sorry folks, for anyone who is going to be playing with me going forward, I don't prepare much. It's all about just roll the dice and then say fuck and to the pun, really.
I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle, kind of between all of you. So, a bit like what you were saying about not prepping too many goals. Mm-hmm. I tend to prep one thing that the character really wants that's outside the bounds of the adventure.
Yeah.
Like, they want to become a duke, because it gives me something to go, if they meet some nobles, they're going to kiss ass. Like,
Yeah.
it's never going to come up in the adventure, really. It's not a problem, even for one-shots, that really long-term goal. And then it's similar to what you were saying, Ash. I just, in my head before the game, I make sure I just go through and go, okay, what's kind of the meta, what works, what combination and what flow does that go? I don't write it down as a flow chart. But things like spellcasters, what you were saying, with that D&D Beyond, I wouldn't play a spellcaster.
It's just, it seems to be so complicated. There's probably people out there going, of course it isn't. It's super
You
simple.
just
What are
buy
you
this
talking
pack
about?
of 300 spell cards and
Yeah,
flip through them. Yeah.
But there are parts of it where we've spoken before about your spells. How many spells do you have at different levels, and what spells are available to you that you can have access to all the time, or you have to choose them overnight? And how do you know if you have to choose them overnight, or you just can use all 28 of the spells? No, you only have 4 spells. And it's things like a warlock, for example, they're really easy because you can hit people and you have a choice of 2 spells. That's it.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, so that's probably the extent that I would go when it comes to playing spellcasters. I've tried like a sorcerer, be a bit feisty, but it's
I think for me,
Spicy sorcerer.
yeah.
I think for me, one of the other issues that I consider is that no matter how much preparation that you put into your character build, the story will often change the way that your character develops. I mean, going back to a point we've already spoken about, Mara. One of my characters in a story found Mara as a baby. Now, I don't know whether you'd always planned for Mara to be such an iconic part of the world, but my character just became besotted by protecting Mara at all costs. And that has come to full sort of fruition in my life as a DM as well, because if I get a scenario now where Mara is put in a potential dangerous scenario, if any player on my table dare to put her at risk, I'll kill them.
Yeah, threats have been made.
Absolutely, no shadow of a doubt. And so my character just became this all consumed about just protecting Mara. And now she is one of the leaders of a great city in the Allhavens. Yeah. And I don't think that's not something I could prepare for, because I didn't realise I was going to actually find this little helpless baby bundle in a crate in the middle of the market.
I think that's a really interesting kind of topic, though, in terms of what you thought your character was going to be and then where the story kind of takes you. I mean, Zaphon's another example. I know you had grander ideas for Zaphon, even when you were kind of starting to create that character, because he was a player character as well. But did the actual adventures that you were using or playing Zaphon in, did that change his journey?
Absolutely, and Bertie and Andy were both in that adventuring party, so have played alongside Zaphon as well in his mortal form. But so obviously it was all done in collaboration with the DM, which was Chris, and I made that character as a stereotypical cultist who firmly believes that they're doing the right thing, and is very sort of passionate about their beliefs. But then always had in the back of my mind, well, he will change depending on how people react to him. And one of my favourite encounters it wasn't even really an encounter. It was almost a role play moment with Bertie and your character Mouse. Where you had that book, didn't you?
Yes.
And you're like, people on this page are good, and people on this page are evil. Where do I put Zaphon? And I think you put him in the middle.
Yeah. Like down in the seam on part of both, because that was the thing. It was also with how you were playing it. She genuinely didn't know, because it's like, okay, he's doing some things that you might consider bad. Like there was someone died and then he performed some rites over them, and Mouse is like, we don't even know what religion they are. What are you doing? So, but then there were other times with how he played him. It was like Father Christmas at times. He was like this jolly fellow and everything's great, and she's like, oh, that's a good guy, but then you've just burnt a body. I don't know where to put you.
All of that sort of came full circle at Dark Ascension as well, didn't it? Because in Dark Ascension, obviously that's Zaphon becoming a god, and he had these what were called avatars of his adventurers. So there was an avatar of Mouse, there was an avatar of Thorin, there was an avatar of Adamar, who was Niall's character, there was an avatar of Thesera, which was Lizzie's character as well. And the those avatars were Zaphon's perception of what those characters could have been, like how powerful they could have been and what he would have turned them into had he been able to help them become more powerful.
I've never cried so much during a game as I did when that happened. Legitimately, because I didn't know that that's what it was. I thought it was genuinely my character had been just changed and was corrupted. I'm like, I don't want to attack her. Why is she so horrible? And I was weeping at the table. I was so sad, but that was genius.
I knew that wasn't the original Thorin by virtue of the fact that he had lost his goat legs and had his 2 normal legs put back on.
But that, going back to what you're saying, John, that's an example of how the character can change depending on the adventure and how other people interact with him. If everyone had hated Zaphon in that party and just not want anything to do with him, I'd hate to think how evil, twisted and bitter he'd be right now, because he's already pretty bad, as you know, John, from some of our Tuesday night sessions.
Yeah, he's a pain in the arse.
Mouse still thinks she can save him.
Does she?
Yeah. She 100% still believes that he is just...
Misguided.
He's just misguided, he's been caught up in something and he can turn it around.
I've always thought about doing his origin story, like expanding on his background, like his early background.
Yeah.
So how he fell into the cult and what the cult were like and how the cult treated him, because that all plays into him.
So what would you guys advise someone coming to like their first charity event, creating that first character? What do you kind of advise them to focus on when they're creating that character?
There's one big thing, and I talk about this a lot as well. It was one of the first ever articles we put in CGG Monthly, which was give your character a flaw. Have something wrong with them. Because if you play a perfect character, you'll get bored of them. There's got to be something about them which is a little bit crazy or a little bit off or unique or different. If you just look at what you guys play in this podcast, we look at G, for example. There's some definite flaws with G, but it keeps G interesting as a character and will keep Andy engaged in playing G as well. And if you look at successful characters, so take Critical Role, other podcasts like this are available, and look at someone like I can't think of his name, the guy who plays the Barbarian. Grog, yeah. Travis, thank you. Look at Travis, the way he plays Grog. He plays Grog stupid, but not like really stupid. Kind of like
he's still a functional character. Isn't
exactly. He's a naive stupid, isn't he? And that's endearing, and people engage with that. And then he can engage with that as well, and make his character that much more interesting.
I think it's not just the fact that the character is interesting, but it actually gives you the opportunity for your character development. You can. Becomes aware of your flaw, or maybe your fellow heroes sort of identify the flaw, and then it's how do you address that? Do you just accept it and carry on, or do you try and overcome it? I mean, again, you're right. G has got some flaws, and I'm hoping that during the coming events and sessions that those flaws will be challenged, and potentially he will start to develop them and actually get some more self-confidence in his abilities. But we shall see.
If we survive the mountains, of course.
That's assuming, assuming he doesn't die.
There was a campaign I ran, it was a Company of Fate, so you were in it, Andy, where I got everyone to roll for a floor. Do you remember that?
Seem to, yeah.
Yeah, sure?
Yeah,
okay.
Probably not.
And the two that stick out in my head with that was Chris rolled that his wizard didn't like the sight of blood and was visibly sick every time he saw blood. Really helpful for a D&D campaign, so he played into that well. The other one that always sticks out in my mind is Niall's cleric, was called Magnus, and he was overwhelmingly positive. And I will never forget, you were stood outside a skull-shaped cave with hordes of grey orcs pouring out of this cave, crawling all over the ceilings, coming out of the eyes and the nose of the skull, and everyone else had legged it. And Niall literally said, I'm going to stand there waiting to greet my new friends. And it's those little moments. I remember that, and that was years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So those moments will sort of stand out forever.
I think that's brilliant. What about you, Bertie?
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
A lot of people come into it and they think, oh, I need to have this dark secret and I need to be like this way and then do this and I have this thing going on. It's like, no, keep it as simple as you possibly can, because one, it's a lot easier to play that character when it's simple. Like, my character really likes the colour blue, and anywhere they go, they see something blue, they want to try and buy it. Something as simple as that. Or they're a bit of a dick, but it's just because, you know, they didn't get a lot of love as a child. It's stuff like that. When you try and multi-layer them, you spend so much time trying to force those different elements into the game, which then can take away from the actual experience of playing with the people you're with. So for a lot of my characters, when I come into it, like for Vesper for example, I've realised as I'm playing, she's very similar to another character that I've played in a different campaign, who some listeners might know. Her name was Soma, and she was a Dragonborn. And it's very literal, quite basic. You have a conversation, no, and that's it. There's not, I'm hiding secrets from you, and you've got to figure out what I'm hiding from you, but I'm also secretly an earl, but I'm actually, this isn't my face, and these aren't my legs. It's when you overcomplicate, because you've got to remember all of that as well.
I find that also restricts your role-playing opportunities.
Yeah.
Actually having that level and that detailed background actually makes it harder for you to be your character and allow that growth that we've kind of spoken about. I think for me, my advice would be don't create an outsider. So it's fine to create, you know, if you want to create a ranger who spends 90% of their time in the woods, that's great. But when he gets to town, don't make him a shady outsider. Make him super happy to see everybody, because he hasn't spoken to anyone for a year.
Yeah.
You know, he wants to talk to people and interact with people, because he's just been talking to his bloody tiger for the last 12 months.
Damn.
But you talk to us, but you're not you're shady, but not in that kind of, well, I'm not going to talk to anyone, I'm going to sneak off on my own and do my own adventures. Like, it's a group game, so build your characters in a way that you find fun and other people would find fun would be.
And be flexible with it as well.
Yeah.
Because if you get into a situation, you think, well, I had set in my mind that my character does this, but then when you get there, you think, actually, it makes more sense for the way the game is going and the way the other people are playing it, for me to be maybe a little bit flexible here and go, instead of saying, no, I'm not doing that, be like, okay, you can try and convince me to help you out, not just a straight no, or I think I would go this way when everyone else is going the other way. It's like, okay, well, why? How does that tie in?
That's when people usually, it's what my character would do. And if you find yourself saying that, you just need to think for a moment, is this in the best interest of the enjoyment of the game for everybody here?
Yeah.
Or am I just being a dick?
I think there's a delicate balance between doing what you think your character would do in a situation and just going off on your own. So if everyone's around a fire and there is a noise in the forest, if all of the rest of the party go off, it's like, and you want to stay by the fire, it's like, okay, play into that. Why? It's like, well, it's been raining, I need to keep the fire stoked, kind of thing, if it goes out, or I'm protecting our gear, or I can't see because I don't have dark vision and we're at night, so I've got more chance. It's just playing into what happens, and you can do different stuff, but just have a reason for it.
I think the thing is, you can do what your character would do, but I think if you have to vocalise at a table, oh, it's what my character would do, what that actually means is the other players are looking at you with a, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
And you're going, oh, it's what my character would do. And so you're playing a character that's conflicting with the rest of the party.
Yeah. And it pulls you out as well.
Yeah.
As soon as someone said that, it's like, I'm playing a game now, aren't I? I was in it a second ago. Yeah. I was that person. Now I'm just looking at you across the table.
Yeah, that's it. So I think you're right, Ash. That kind of, if you have to say it, you need to have a look at the way you're playing your character potentially.
Yeah, because if you do something out of the blue and it's cool and fun and funny, people will be laughing and engaging with it. But if people are looking at you like you're just shitting their cornflakes, then
sometimes literally.
Why did you and Andy just share a look?
He has a habit of pooping in games.
But only if I've got a squirrel that I can use its towel to wipe my bottom with.
I think the worst game I've ever played for that sort of stuff was you were DMing it, Andy, and there was your dad on it as well. Yeah, there's Gary and you two, and it's just like, oh my, just backwards and forwards, just sitting there, just going, oh, what is happening? what is happening here?
Yeah.
There's poo conversations.
It's
there
just literally. I know you're
Willy's out
you will be
with all
listening
sorts.
because I'm going to make you listen. If my dad is playing a game, it's going to be some bag made from a ball sack and some sexual innuendo, and it's like, just stop it,
It's hilarious.
behave yourself. But he enjoys it. So.
One of the conversations we have when we do table allocations, one of the very first things people look for is, have I got Gary on my table? Not because they don't want Gary on their table.
It's an extra level of prep,
It's
isn't it?
People want the fun, because it is funny. He's funny with it as well. It's not like he's just like inappropriate. It's that funny level of sort of engagement within the game that people enjoy.
I think sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get used to players where they are doing things and saying things that you don't necessarily expect. It took me a while, I think, because with Gary, he asks you a lot about his character sheet. It took me a while to realise he knows what's on his character sheet, and he thinks it's funny asking you. He knows way more than he's letting on for.
Oh, well, I hope so. I question it sometimes.
But,
We need to get him on the podcast.
yeah.
We need to get him on.
I think the only thing for me is that, and we have had words before, is that when it's people that you've played with a lot of time, it's fine.
Yeah.
But if you're on a table with people who've maybe never played with you, it's so risky, because you might have that camaraderie and those in-jokes with the other people, but if you've got someone new who has no idea, doesn't understand, like the old man jabs between Dad and Andy, it's a non-stop, but it's because they know each other, they're of a similar age, it's kind of a thing they have going on. But if you get someone new who comes in and like, oh, they're going to make fun of how old I am. It's like, no. They know each other. You're not going to be attacked. This is fine. So it's finding that balance sometimes in a game of when it's appropriate to have those little jokes and asides and things, and when it's like, ooh, maybe tone it down, Scully.
So I think that leads on nicely. We talk a lot about the sort of DM prepping and the 6 Ps for the DMs. What about player conduct at the table? So what do you think is kind of number one at one of the events if a new player comes up, rocks up to the table? What do you think they should be like? Or what would the expectations be, possibly?
We have in all of our event packs player conduct. So we, as an organisation, set out our expectations straight away. So anyone who's coming along knows what will and will not be tolerated. And we've never really had to act on that, which is good. But I think it goes back to what you were saying, Bertie, about just being aware of who you're with and what you're saying. And if you do that, 99% of everything else is going to follow.
Yeah. And with the guide that you give, it's obvious, you're not creating an offensive character, and because 90% of the time that you're there as your character. So if you followed the guidelines that were given in the player's pack, it's going to be someone who isn't a problem character, air quotes. But if for me, the difficult side of it comes when, in those moments when it's not the player character and it's the people, and sometimes it is just, you can't escape it, it's just a personality versus personality difference, which is something you can't really account for. But I think if you're just able to be aware of that and to not react to it, to just go, okay, I recognise, maybe me and you, John, personality wise, we don't really jam.
You don't mean that.
Of course not. But you go,
I do.
but instead of sitting there and just be like, oh, every time they're talking and just like rolling your eyes and physically like reacting to them, you just recognise, okay, but I'm not going to do anything. If you want to sit there in your character for the whole time, do it if it makes it easier.
Andy, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it could be. I mean, it's a difficult topic because we've talked about how people. I don't agree that you have offensive characters. I think people can take offence. But none of us are actually intentionally going to sort of set out to offend people in a game, whether we're running it as a DM or whether we're a player. We're there to have fun. It's a game at the end of the day. Now, there is a risk that different people have different values and perceive different things to be funny and not funny, and you may cause offence. But if that happens, then it's how do you sort of address that? you're all big enough and ugly enough to look after yourself, and you can just sort of put it aside and carry on, which is what I would hope would happen. I mean, Ash is right, we do have some guidelines as to what we expect, and there are sort of lines that we would not allow to be and would not tolerate being stepped over, and that's only right. We've got a duty of care to protect the people that we are sort of supporting for the day, especially those that perhaps are minors. But yeah, sadly, we're all human beings and we're not all going to get on. Whilst your characters might do, there are regular players that you think, really, you're a dick, I don't get on with you. But you just got to suck it up and play on. You're only going to be with them for a couple of hours.
We try and mitigate it as well as a charity and an organisation, because some people might not have the confidence to do that, or might not feel comfortable doing that, or not want to come back. So we have this kind of almost layered means of dealing with things that people aren't happy with. And we'll always say, well, speak to your DM in the first instance. If that DM, or you can't speak to that DM, or hopefully not, touch wood, if the DM's the problem, there's always an event organiser, which is someone who isn't running a table and who is available to deal with those kinds of problems that you can come and talk to as well. Or failing that, we always have trustees at events, and anyone can talk to a trustee. All 4 of us are trustees, so anyone can come and talk to us about anything, and if there's a problem, then we can deal with it. So we try and build those layers in where people have somewhere to go if they feel uncomfortable or they're not happy, and can tell us about it, so we can retain people coming to charity events and having the biggest impact we possibly can. And Andy's absolutely right what you say about safeguarding younger people, make sure they're okay, but that vulnerability also applies to people who might have disabilities or social anxiety or anything like that, and might find those interactions difficult or more difficult to process or deal with.
I must be honest, all the events that I've been to, I've never felt that kind of caring that you're talking about there, that safeguard,
You've never felt that caring.
Never felt that caring. Weirdly, what I'm saying is I feel like that's actually, by all of our members, all of our regulars, is pushed out to everybody, no matter who you are. Like if we find out you've got someone who's never been to one of our events at the table, like lots and lots of our members make extra effort to say hello, to talk, to chat, have you played before, sit next to them and help them with their character sheet if they need a bit of a steer or give ideas. Everyone's very, very supportive. And I think our members generally are great players and approach it really well.
I think, as I said, it is a game, and we just want people to have fun. And I would hope that we're all mature enough that if someone were to do something that was perhaps not necessarily inappropriate, because I say we've got guidelines, but if there was a humour, some humour that wasn't appreciated by us all around the table, then I would hope that if it was highlighted to the person who was using that humour, they'd be mature enough to say, okay, I don't want to cause offence, so I'll just rein in a bit. And that's what I would prefer to see, and that's what I think I have seen. I don't think I've ever seen anyone sort of step over the line and try and justify it and just not rein it in if asked to.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I've never seen it really go too far at any of the events.
We've had 3 incidents in the whole time we've been running events where we've had to step in and do something and they were minor. And the way we dealt with those incidents is talking to the person who's in control of that table and giving them the confidence to go and deal with that themselves, and the tools and the skills to be able to go and deal with that, because they just didn't know what to do. They were unusual situations.
I think a lot of the time people are just excited to be at the events and just get a bit much occasionally, as they just calm down a little bit.
The more people turn up to these events, the more they get to know other people, and then they become more relaxed, like you say, John, and it just becomes more normal. Yeah, exactly, more normal. And you're right, we've got fantastic members who will help people. To name a few, Dave F. It's fantastic for helping new members. If we've got a new person, he's one of the people I will look for, see if they're on the table, and just mention it to him. You've got Martin, who's great, plays us on Tuesday night. He's fantastic. Niall, even last November, there was a player who was really anxious, so I got them in early. We went to see Niall, who was their DM. He spoke to them before the crowds of people came in, so all that support is there.
I think we'll end it there. It's a great conversation, great topics, and we will see you all next week. Thank you all for joining us.
Bye.
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 this week's episode concluded, it's time to thank our Patreon members. Our Ruby membership, Joshua, Alberta, Paul, Dave R, Claire, Laura, Jason.
Emerald membership, Stuart. Sapphire membership, Becca M, Gary, Neil.
Diamond Geezers, Zeke, Lizzie, Chris, Martin, John, Bertie and Ash.
And of course our Obsidian members, Ant, James, Becca GS, Ethan, Niall, Dave F, and finally our 2 ruling council members, Chris and Sophia. Thank you so much all of you for your support and for helping us do what we do.